All right, so here we go. We are starting with scalenes, and I'm going to show you through this program all of the attachment sites so that you have a good idea for your education on the anatomy of the body as we go through corrective actions and assessments. So we're going to take off some of this muscle here. And we're going to get down to the posterior scalene. See how deep that is? There's posterior scalene right here. Good. If we add another layer on, we'll see the middle and anterior scalene. And there's scalenes there, and you can see it behind here. We're going to click on that, and we're going to start to look at scalene itself. So let's go in the deepest one first. Here's your deep scalene, your C4, C5, C6 of the neck. It's a little bit lower, going down to the rib, the second rib, coming up into that cervical neck. So that's the posterior scalene, and you can see how the movement is. It's moving the ear downward towards that rib. So a really easy way of looking at it is where it's connected to, it's going to draw down in contraction to that area. The middle scalene is going from rib 1 to C7, C6, C5, C4, C3, and C2. So we've got more vertebra involved, and on the upper rib it's going similar direction. There's that first connection point, there's the second connection point, so we have that contraction of the neck with rotation and lateral flexion of the anterior scalene, which is C3, C4, C5, C6 down to that first rib. So this is a complex muscle. It's one of those muscles that has a lot of different issues going on. So let's talk a little bit about it as this plays that that movement. So the biggest worry, some issue with scalenes is it's considered what's called the entrappers because of the thoracic outlet entrapment that it can create. And the thoracic outlet comes in through this area down into the shoulder for the shoulder nerve bundle. And the shoulder girdle and upper extremities can become involved with that. And the pain can radiate down the front and the back sides of the shoulder into the arm. And sometimes it skips over the upper arm to the elbow to the radial forearm and extends to the thumb and the index finger. So it becomes a muscle that most people don't identify with as being a forearm problem. So I have a lot of people that come in, they're like, my hands are numb. And of course I go to scalenes right away, and they're like, oh no, my hands are numb. And so this is a great way for me to show you why I don't work on what you tell me to work on. Because over time, you start to see patterns and compensations and adaptations and all kinds of other fun relative muscles that have no visual relationship to what's going on in the body. So this is a perfect example. On the left, it can sometimes be easily mistaken for angina too. So when it's a left affected scalene, you'll have pain and radiation down the left arm. It can go numb. So your symptoms of scalenes when they become trigger pointed with pain patterns is a primary myofascial pain, which is your muscular system, finding pain throughout the neck and the shoulder. And then second is sensory of motor disturbances due to the neurovascular entrapment. So then you have radiation, and I've actually even had people that it goes up into the face with numbness and tingling and then down all the way into the arms. So if you're radial sided, the pinky side of the hand is going numb, then we can pretty much bet that it's a muscular myofascial source. But if it's the thumb side, the ulnar side, and there's puffiness, it's more than likely there's a brachial plexus and a subclavian vein entrapment. So that is really important. And also the lymph nodes will be affected, and you can have clogged lymph in that area, and I will see that. You'll feel while I'm doing your therapy, when you are prone face down, I go in under the clavicle trying to get this again while you're in a relaxed position to feel if there are areas that have stagnancy there and that need to be worked a little bit differently. So when you activate the trigger points, and a trigger point would be any area of the muscle that has the known trigger points of scalenes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different trigger points in 3 of those different parts of the muscle. The lowest on the posterior scalene, the trigger point is in this vicinity. In the middle scalenes, it's through here. And the anterior scalene, it's up top a little bit higher through this area here. So those trigger points can radiate all the way to the back scapula, down sometimes into the upper arm, front arm, chest, side of the arm, hand, first finger, thumb, whole top of the hand. It goes really moves all over, more so the upper arm and the forearm. The activation of the trigger points can be created by pulling, lifting, lugging, coughing, or chronic muscle strain due to a tilted shoulder girdle axis caused by asymmetry. So things like pulling and lifting with the shoulders up to the ears, having a chronic cough, and a lot of times I will hear people that start to have activations after weeding their garden and overusing and starting to lift with their shoulders, or it's a huge entrapment site for people who drive a lot and are pulling on their wheel, or not that we have a lot of them, but airline flight, fighter pilots, any of that type of where there is a constant pulling. Sailing can also be an activation. Riding horses and being on the reins, swimming can also, and you can also have a secondary trigger point with sternocleidomastoid and levator scapula. So I'm going to stop there with the actual visual aspect of this, and then we're going to go into the tests and the corrective actions video next, where I will show you how to find out if you have scalene dysfunction and how to start to correct it. So this is a finger flexion test for scalenes. This is normal. You can keep all of your first 4 fingers together. If the first one comes up, that's extensor digitorum of the forearm. But if they all are like this and you can't get them flat, that's a positive scalene test. So that means that you need to get your scalenes worked on. All right, so I was just discussing the trigger points, and I've extended this so that I could show you these, because these are really important. They're very deep. They're part of your core. There's a medial and an anterior, and we are going to be prone to lots of entrapments here between thoracic outlet entrapment, and then there could even be venous entrapment here, where you'll see bulging veins in the neck. So really, really important muscle to pay attention to. Right after these trigger points, you'll see the test that you can do for scalene dysfunction. There's 4 trigger points. They're showing this trigger point and how it's radiating down into the hand, into the first finger. Now, all these little dots where it's not heavy red can be numbness and tingling. It doesn't necessarily have to be pain. These can go numb from scalene entrapment. You can see it goes behind the shoulder blade. So lots going on. And then this little trigger point into that, the small section of scalene is going to be more towards the tricep, and then the whole hand. But together, they're going to make you have numb hands. So there also can give you the thoracic outlet entrapment, which can affect the entire arm. It would basically be like you putting a clamp on a hose and watching the hose water dribble out the end. Well, that's how your nerve system is going to go down to your arm. And I worked with stroke victims over the last 40 years, and I would experience that, where it's a very delayed reaction because of the damage to the nervous system. So you're getting a similar response to that, where the nervous system is very delayed, and that's going to mean the response time on anything is going to be slowed down. And when anything is not working properly and efficiently, you're going to get overuses in it because it can't clear out that lactic acid fast enough. So that's the trigger points, and then I'm going to go through antagonists and synergists because scalenes is so interesting. So the antagonist is that opposite muscle, and so we have neck extensors and levator scapula. So your neck extensors are the muscles that you tip the head back with. So if you were to look up at the sky at a plane, that would be your neck extensors, and there's a whole group of them. And then levator scapula is the muscle at the top of the shoulder blade that if you have some forward head, or if you use your arms a lot doing things, there may be a little bit of a bump there that you ride over with your fingers. And if you do my unlocking the neck, you'll feel that sometimes if you work a lot with your hands. And that travels up to the back of the neck into the cervical vertebra. And that's an antagonist to scalenes. So if you start, scalenes is very postural. If you are really if you're short in that scalene, these two muscles, which are also postural, are going to be pulling back, and so you're going to get thickening on them. And then your synergists is really where I'm so intrigued by. I've been talking to people about synergy. Every mentor that I have had in my life towards their latter part of their career got into synergies and synergists because they're the most complex part of any type of study, and they take the most experience. And I am moving into synergists at this point in my career, and it's so exciting because my career is already so wonderful and I love everything I do. And now that I have the time to really spend time on synergists and look at them more in depth, I always sit there and it just validates everything that I do. Abdominals, scalenes. Abdominals is a phasic muscle. I just had a case the other day where they were hanging from a bar, pulling their knees up to their chest, trying to do some abdominal work. Set off scalenes. Psoas, your hip flexors. That's a deep core muscle, and it's a slow muscle. It's a slow twitch postural muscle. Scalenes, when scalenes is in contraction, psoas helps it. So it may stabilize, it may assist. Deltoids, now you have two different fibers in deltoids. The front anterior deltoid is that slow twitch, and then the top and the back have a little bit of both. So that is a good muscle to think about when you are doing deltoid work. You're going to be initiating scalenes. Triceps, a fast twitch muscle fiber. Any type of chest press, you have to be careful that you do not let those shoulder blades move forward. They are going to be loading scalenes, and that is going to encourage some dysfunction there. Brachioradialis is in the forearm, your gripper muscle, and here is the jet pilot syndrome, where they're taking off and landing and they have to hold on to that gear so that they can brace themselves. brachioradialis, wrist extensors, thumb extensors, they're all involved with that movement. And then scalene. So you'll see a short scalene on a pilot where the clavicle will move up into a V because of the shortness, and then it makes them feel like they have a very heavy head. I had a young girl come to me years ago, and she looked very distraught when she came in. Her mom brought her in. She was probably about 15 years old, and she was a jumper, young jumper with very lovely little pony. And she was very, very concerned face on her. And her mom was saying how she was having pains through her eye, weird sensations into her scalp. And when I got into it, I told her, I said, well, you've got some stuff going on in your splenius group, and then your scalenes are short on one side. So we spent some time together, maybe 8 sessions or so, and resolved most of it. But the most interesting part of it is I at one point looked at her very seriously and said, you think that there's something going on with your brain, don't you? Like something really bad. And she looked at me and she said, yeah. And I said, I can see it, but rest assured, there's a lot of muscle in here that's a problem. So let's, move forward with it. And within 4 sessions, she was coming in smiling and so happy. And, it was such a good feeling to see somebody young like that was distraught because of, something unexplained to them, to able to explain it and show it. So that's how complicated this muscle can get. It's a worrying muscle. It's an entrapper. It entraps nerves. It can entrap vascular system, moving up to the brain from the lower body. So it can create a lot of doubt in people's minds, like what's going on? What's wrong with me? And I can tell you that there is a congenital part to scalenes too, where some people are born with short scalenes and they have a very tight clavicle and the rib cage. And so there are things you can do to work with that. And I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do now with some different exercises.
So sometimes a scalene dysfunction can be from paradoxal breathing when your chest is lifting up and your stomach is drawing in diaphragmatically with your breath. So as you inhale, the chest opens and the diaphragm moves downward. So learning how to change your breathing is a really good way to start to open up the scalenes, since they are attached to the rib cage and the lung for rest and part of respiration. So the B section here is showing the complete exhalation by drawing both the diaphragm and the chest in and then exhaling as you do that. And then the inhale is going to be inhaling, the diaphragm comes up and the chest stays still. And then inhaling, and the chest goes up and the diaphragm goes out. So you're doing that, synchronizing them. So these two are part of a breath. So this is the first part, and then this is the second part. So it's both in together, then the diaphragm, and then the chest, letting it move up into that breath. And this is for scalene dysfunction. There is another rib cage breathing technique that I use to help people open up the lung and exercise the thoracis, since the rib cage is where the movement of the thoracis fluid at the circulatory point at the each process of that vertebra are. So this is specifically for scalene dysfunction.